George Monbiot from England, who's pro-nuclear. He wrote an article for The Guardian. I can't remember the exact title, but it was something about why Fukushima proved to him that nukes weren't so bad. Wrap your fucking head around that.
A Chinese nuclear plant has shut down one of its reactors for maintenance after minor damage to fuel rods.
Why can't environmentalists? Because Bill Gates told you so? Because Elon Musk is looking for another planet and you think you're going?
For radioactive releases. So can you start us off?
Well, when it comes to that person saying that we're not going to be extinguished until the second half of the century, I suggest he go to YouTube and look up the Albert Bartlett lecture on the exponential function.
1 millimeter thick, and I will carefully place it.
And anyone who's paying any attention to climate change at the moment can just see the acceleration. The amount of fires that we're building, that are burning at the moment all around the planet is much more than at the same time last year, which was already our most recent record. So that's why I think that people, they think that we're being alarmist when we talk about how quickly this will fall over. But if you look and pay attention now, you can see that acceleration. And there's a thing that I think that we should all consider. If you've ever been on a surfboard, a skateboard, a motorbike, or a car going fast, and you get the speed wobbles, you have a really, really short window of opportunity to decelerate and get back control. Well, guess what, folks? Between the feedback loops that are kicking in and accelerating it, and us not taking our foot off the accelerator and putting it on the brake, this is a compounding feedback in itself. So I think that's, if I can convey anything, this is the rapidity that we're going to be looking at.
So Kevin is aware of these because they've happened since my knowing him has happened. But I'm always interested in how climate is affecting nuclear power, because it's the first thing I think of when I hear that there's another huge fire on the West Coast somewhere or anywhere, or it's the first thing I think of when there's strong winds near nuclear reactor plants anywhere, or flooding, or freezing weather. I mean, all of these things, that my first thought is what nuclear power plant's grid is going to get affected. And we were talking about Hanford, and I just was looking at fires at Hanford because I remember all of these. And these are fires on Hanford's land. And on Hanford's land, there's also a nuclear power plant called the Columbia Generating Station. So there's that plus the most nuclear waste in like all of the world right there. That is basically contained in leaking tanks under the ground, leaking into the Columbia River. So here's one: lightning strike ignites 9,000 acre fire on Hanford Nuclear Reservation Mountain, June 2020. It was enormous. It was on Hanford's land. Here's another one. People caused the wildfire that's burned more than 40,000 acres on the Hanford nuclear site and area. Investigation continues. July 18, 2019. The causes of the fires at Hanford this season were varied. One was associated with a bird flying into a power line. 5 resulted from lightning strikes, and 2 of the remaining 3 are suspected to have been caused by vehicles. The largest fire was on Saddle Mountain. In addition, the Hanford Fire Department responded to 13 mutual aid requests for wildland fire suppression. Anyway, extreme drought conditions and higher than normal temperatures across the Northwest combined to increase potential for wildland fires this season. So again, this is just one spot. We've had frozen grids in frozen wires shutting off the grid in the Midwest for the last few years. Fort Calhoun is a big one. It's been shut down from floods. The dam there is going to break. Flooding and freezing wires.
You're smart enough to do the impossible. So in your mind, what's the nearest possible time, whether it's minutes, weeks, years, how many years, when these things that seem to have been independent and bad may all kind of begin to become cooperative in some way and create a cataclysmic event?
Well, I'd say it could be as little as 5 years.
Okay.
Because so much has happened just in the last year or two. If you go back 2 years, or 3 years, 2 years perhaps, we see nasty things happening, but they didn't all happen at the same time. And now we're seeing nasty things all happening at the same time and getting worse. So the acceleration of catastrophes that have happened in the last couple of years, which we haven't noticed so much because of COVID, has been uppermost in people's minds, but the natural catastrophes have been accelerating. Add another 5 years to that, and we could have something truly terrible going on.
Thank you. And I have one more question, and I think I'm done unless Patrick wants to jump back in. Just days ago, I was sitting with a couple of my colleagues talking about this problem, and we came up with a crazy idea, and I want to run this idea past you. I always like to end these things on a positive note, even when it's difficult. So I have an idea that I'd like to share with you and get your reaction to it. And for lack of a better name, we decided to call it Go Light. And what the idea is if all of the if all the leaders in the world became informed with what you just said, we just took this recording and they all got a chance to see it and actually understood what we're talking about here, what you just said, then let's just pretend for a moment, a crazy moment, that they actually responded to the crisis and decided to do something. And that decision, as a group of nations, maybe just beginning with 5 large nations, was to drop all the other financial agendas that everybody's got a sweet spot for. I like apple trees. Well, forget it for a while, and instead spend money on solar energy. And for 5 years starting tomorrow, they did nothing but spend money on solar farms. And 5 years later, and I don't know this, I'm just estimating this, they were able to take a pretty big chunk out of the apple. Maybe they got it all done, maybe they got 2/3 of it done, but things that would have taken 100 years or would have taken 50 years, the world got done in 5 years. And in a sense, we went neutral and carbon neutral. So every country did its part. Everybody built solar farms. Countries that couldn't do it, we paid for it. We went to Africa and did it there. So whatever the answer was, the whole world got together, went Go Light, spent the money, whatever the money, doesn't matter what the money is, go into debt. We recognize the difficulty of the situation. This is the worst crisis we've ever faced. We're going to get through it, and here's how. If we did that, what would the result be?
Well, I think it would certainly help to save the planet, but we need to do more besides, because we've got to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and that's the terrible problem that we've got, because it's unacknowledged that we can reduce our emissions as much as we like, or it would be great to reduce them down to zero or to a low value, but the carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere stays in the atmosphere. So we've got to do more than just reduce emissions of carbon dioxide. We've got to make a gigantic...
And what you leave behind is a planet where the life support system is about to fall over for the next generation. And because our spiritual philosophy...
I want to correct you there.
Drivers,
I want to correct you there.
Okay, this generation.
You just you fell into a trap. The trap was you want to pin it on, well, it's our children's problem, which gives us as the adults in the room, the supposed adults in the room, a free pass because, oh, it's our children's, it's going to happen to us. We those of us alive now are there's a high likelihood we're going to get creamed by
Yeah.
the crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and that's a common trope that I fall into. And I absolutely agree too. I'm
You and
53 years old.
98% of humanity. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
The plant operator said in a statement it had shut Unit 1 at the Taishan nuclear plant in Guangdong province after lengthy talks with technicians. Taishan is the first site in the world to have this kind of reactor. The type of reactor, known as EPR, is also said to be built in other countries, including Finland, France, and at Hinkley Point C in the UK. The latest move comes a month after the Chinese government acknowledged damage to fuel rods at the Taishan unit, but said it was a common problem, with no need for concern. China General Nuclear Power Group, CGN, said in a statement on Friday that the reactor was completely under control. Engineers would find the cause of the damage and replace the fuel rods, the statement read. In June, CNN reported the U.S. government was assessing a reported leak at the site. CNN said French energy firm EDF, which helps run the site, had warned the U.S. government that China's nuclear regulator had raised limits on permissible levels of radiation outside the plant to avoid shutting it down. EDF later said a problem with fuel rods had led to the buildup of gases, which had to be released into the atmosphere. Fuel rods are sealed metal tubes which hold nuclear materials used to fuel the nuclear reactor. Last week an EDF spokesperson told CNN the French company would shut the plant down if it could. They said the decision lay with the Chinese operator. The situation at Taishan was not an emergency, but nevertheless a serious situation, the spokesperson added.
A powerful earthquake triggered tsunami that swept through the facility. That caused meltdowns, hydrogen explosions,